The prestigious halls of the Galactic Medical Academy buzzed with excitement as students from across 17 star systems gathered for their first xenobiology lecture of the term. Among them sat Zephyr-Six, their crystalline epidermis glinting under the artificial lights as they meticulously arranged their neural interface pads. "Can you believe we finally get to study the Deathworlders today?" whispered Nova 8, their bioluminescent appendages pulsing with barely contained enthusiasm. Zephyr-Six felt their own crystalline structure vibrate in response. They had been waiting for this lecture since enrolling in the academy. Professor Quantum Prime glided into the lecture hall, their hovering meditation pod casting a soft blue glow across the eager faces of the students. The professor's 9 sensory tendrils waved gracefully as they activated the holographic display. Today, the professor announced, their voice resonating through both air and electromagnetic frequencies, we begin our study of perhaps the most fascinating, and certainly the most confusing species in the known galaxy, humans. A ripple of excited murmurs spread through the classroom. Several students extended their sensory organs to better absorb the information. Now, before we begin, I must warn you. What you are about to learn may seem impossible. Professor Quantum Prime paused for dramatic effect, their primary eyes shifting through several spectrums of light. These beings evolved on a planet that would kill most of us within minutes. They call it Earth, though many in the galactic community refer to it simply as Deathworld 3. The holographic display shifted to show an image of a human, and Zephyr-Six felt their crystalline structure contract in sympathy. The being looked so exposed. No protective exoskeleton, no energy field, not even basic radiation shielding. "As you can see," continued the professor, humans are classified as soft-bodied organisms. Their outer layer, which they call skin, can be breached by objects as simple as a sheet of processed tree pulp. Their internal support structure is surrounded by easily damaged soft tissue, and their vital organs have minimal natural protection. Nova 8 raised an appendage. "Professor, how do they survive?" An excellent question. The truth is, we're not entirely sure. Their medical technology is primitive by our standards. They still practice invasive surgery, using metal tools to physically cut into their bodies. They repair damaged tissue by simply pushing the separated parts together and waiting for their bodies to naturally reconnect. It's absolutely barbaric. Zephyr-Six furiously recorded every detail, their neural interface struggling to keep up with their excitement. The concept of such vulnerable beings achieving spaceflight seemed impossible, yet here they were, recently admitted to the Galactic Alliance. "But surely they have some form of advanced cellular regeneration?" asked another student, their gas-filled body wobbling with confusion. Professor Quantum Prime's tendrils curled in what the class recognized as their equivalent of a grimace. "No, they simply endure. They wait for their bodies to heal naturally, often continuing their daily activities while injured. It's quite disturbing, really." The class collectively shuddered. Zephyr-Six felt their fascination growing with each new detail. How could any species survive with such limitations? The holographic display showed various human injuries and their primitive treatment methods: stitches, bandages, casts. It seemed more like historical documentation than modern medical practice. Next week, Professor Quantum Prime announced, their tendrils now glowing with excitement, we will have a unique opportunity. For the first time in the Academy's history, we will be welcoming a human medical student to our xenobiology program. The lecture hall erupted in a chaos of flashing appendages, crystalline vibrations, and electromagnetic pulses. Zephyr-Six could hardly contain their excitement. A real human here at the Academy. Perhaps now they would finally understand how these fascinating creatures managed to survive. The day of the humans' arrival brought an unprecedented crowd to the Academy's reception chamber. Zephyr-Six and Nova 8 had arrived 3 hours early, securing prime observation positions near the quantum-stabilized entrance portal. "I heard they have to wear protective suits just to survive in our atmosphere," whispered a gaseous student named Pulsar 3, their form swirling with nervous energy. "Don't be ridiculous," Nova 8 retorted, their bioluminescent patterns flickering in amusement. "They achieved spaceflight. They must have some basic environmental adaptation capabilities." Before further speculation could continue, the portal hummed to life. The gathered students fell silent, their various sensory organs focused intently on the shimmering doorway. Through the portal stepped a surprisingly normal-looking being. Luna Martinez strode into the chamber with confident steps, carrying what appeared to be a primitive data storage device under one arm. Her dark hair was pulled back in what Zephyr-Six's neural interface identified as a ponytail. And she wore the standard Academy uniform, modified only slightly to accommodate her bipedal form. "Hello everyone," Luna's voice rang out clear and cheerful. "I hope I'm not late. The quantum tunneling always messes with my watch." She held up her wrist, showing a mechanical timepiece that caused several students to emit frequencies of disbelief. Professor Quantum Prime glided forward. "Welcome, Student Martinez. We are honored to have Earth's first representative at our institution. Are you comfortable? Do you require any medical assistance after the journey?" Luna laughed, a sound that caused Zephyr-Six's crystalline structure to resonate pleasantly. "I'm fine, Professor. Just a bit of standard quantum lag. Nothing a cup of coffee won't fix." The gathered students exchanged confused signals. This fragile being was dismissing quantum displacement effects as a minor inconvenience, effects that required most species several hours of medical recuperation. During the tour that followed, Zephyr-Six couldn't help but notice how casually Luna moved through the academy. She showed no signs of the constant caution they had expected from such a vulnerable species. She even accidentally bumped into a crystalline student, immediately apologizing while rubbing her shoulder. "Did that not damage your soft tissue?" Zephyr-Six couldn't help but ask, their medical curiosity overwhelming their social protocols. "Oh," Luna rotated her shoulder. "Nah, just a little bump. I've had worse playing rugby." The concept of voluntarily engaging in physical impact sports sent waves of horror through the observing students. Yet Luna seemed completely unfazed, continuing to chat and joke as they made their way to the laboratory wing. "Tomorrow," Professor Quantum Prime announced, "Student Martinez will join our advanced xenobiology practical session. We will be conducting high-energy cellular manipulation experiments." Several students extended their safety appendages in alarm. Surely they wouldn't allow such a fragile being near potentially dangerous equipment? Luna, however, was already examining the laboratory setup with obvious enthusiasm. "Sweet. Is that a quantum field separator? We had something similar in my university back home, though ours was held together with duct tape and student prayers." As the tour concluded, Zephyr-Six and Nova-8 watched Luna chatting with a group of energy-based students, apparently completely unconcerned about the potentially harmful radiation they naturally emitted. "There's something we're missing," Zephyr-Six mused, their crystal matrix humming with thought. "Everything we've learned about human physiology suggests she should be far more cautious, more afraid of injury." Nova-8's bioluminescence pulsed in agreement. Perhaps tomorrow's practical session will provide some answers. Neither of them could have predicted just how enlightening and terrifying that session would prove to be. The advanced xenobiology laboratory hummed with energy as students prepared their workstations for the day's experiments. Zephyr-Six watched Luna Martinez set up her equipment with what seemed like reckless speed, her hands moving confidently among the delicate instruments. "You might want to be more careful," Nova-8 suggested, their bioluminescence pulsing with concern. "The quantum field separator can be quite unstable." Luna grinned, connecting power couplings with practiced ease. "Thanks, but I've handled worse. You should see the equipment we work with in human hospitals. Half of it looks like it belongs in a museum." Professor Quantum Prime's tendrils rippled with unease as they observed Luna's workspace. "Student Martinez, perhaps you should enable the personal shield generator." "Oh, right," Luna said, but made no move to activate it. "Just let me finish calibrating this first." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. A sudden power surge caused the quantum field separator to destabilize. Warning signals blared as energy arced across the laboratory. Most students immediately activated their defensive mechanisms. Zephyr-Six's crystal structure hardened, Nova-8's bioluminescent field intensified, and others retreated into their protective shells or force fields. Luna, however, lunged forward. "Everyone stay back," she shouted, grabbing an insulated tool and reaching directly into the crackling field of energy. Her hands moved with incredible speed, disconnecting power couplings and rerouting energy flows. A bolt of quantum energy struck her left arm, burning through her sleeve. The acrid smell of burned human flesh filled the air, causing several students to emit distress signals. Yet Luna barely flinched, continuing to work as blood dripped down her arm. "Almost. got it with a final adjustment. The separator powered down, the dangerous energy dissipating harmlessly. Only then did Luna look at her injured arm, her expression more annoyed than pained. Student Martinez, Professor Quantum Prime, rushed forward, tendrils waving in alarm. "We must get you to the medical bay immediately. Such an injury could be life-threatening." Luna laughed, already pulling a small container from her pocket. "No need to worry, Professor. I've got my first aid kit right here." The entire class watched in horrified fascination as Luna calmly cut away the burned sleeve of her uniform. The wound was severe, a deep burn that had laid bare several layers of tissue. Yet Luna's hands remained steady as she cleaned the injury with antiseptic wipes. "This might be interesting for you all to watch, actually," she said, her voice remarkably cheerful. "This is pretty basic human field medicine." She pulled out a small spray canister, biofoam. Not exactly approved by our FDA yet, but it works great in a pinch. The spray covered her burn in a layer of quickly hardening foam. Stops the bleeding, keeps it clean, and promotes healing. Next came what looked like primitive adhesive strips, butterfly closures. Sometimes the old ways are still the best. She applied them with practiced efficiency. And finally, good old-fashioned gauze and compression wrap. Her hands moved quickly, bandaging the wound with what seemed like unnecessary precision. "There. Good as new. Well, good enough until I can get some proper burn cream tonight." The laboratory had fallen completely silent. Even Professor Quantum Prime's tendrils had stopped moving, frozen in shock. "You just treated your own severe injury," Zephyr-Six finally managed to ask, "without pain suppression, without cellular regeneration technology." Luna shrugged her uninjured shoulder. "Well, yeah, it's just a second-degree burn. Maybe a small third-degree patch, but nothing serious. Now, shall we get back to the experiment? I think I know what caused the surge, and I've got some ideas about how to prevent it." "But your injured Nova 8's entire form was flashing with distress patterns. You need professional medical attention, rest, rehabilitation." "Nah, it'll heal fine on its own." Besides, Luna grinned, already reaching for replacement power couplings. "I'm right-handed anyway, though I should probably document this for my thesis. Anyone want to take some photos for my paper on comparative emergency medical techniques?" As Luna cheerfully continued with the experiment, seemingly unbothered by her injury, Zephyr-Six's neural interface struggled to process what they had just witnessed. Everything they had been taught about human fragility, about their primitive medical capabilities, seemed to need serious revision. Perhaps they realized with growing amazement, it wasn't that humans were fragile. Maybe they had evolved to be something far more impressive, a species that simply refused to let injury stop them. After the laboratory incident, Professor Quantum Prime insisted on holding an emergency lecture. The classroom was packed beyond capacity, with students from other departments crowding in to hear Luna Martinez speak about human medical practices. Luna stood at the front, her bandaged arm now in a simple sling she had fashioned from spare materials. The holoprojector hummed to life behind her. "So, you all want to know why I handled that burn the way I did," she began, grinning at the sea of bewildered alien faces. "To understand that, you need to understand how humans approach medicine and injury. Professor, may I access the historical database?" The holoprojector displayed scenes from Earth's history. Humans didn't start with advanced medical technology. We had to figure it out the hard way. Every single step. The first image showed ancient battlefield medicine. This is from thousands of years ago. No anesthesia, no sterilization, just humans doing what needed to be done to survive. We cauterized wounds with hot metal, amputated limbs with handsaws, and yeah, a lot of people died. But here's the thing we learned from every death, from every success, from every horrible mistake. Nova 8's bioluminescence flickered in distress, but without pain suppression. How did the patients survive the shock? "That's just it," Luna said, bringing up another image. "Humans can consciously override pain responses. We develop techniques to stay conscious and functional despite severe trauma. Here's a famous case: a doctor who performed surgery on himself in Antarctica." The alien students watched in stunned silence as Luna described Dr. Leonid Rogozov removing his own appendix. Several gaseous students had to temporarily evacuate the room to compose themselves. "But that's just the beginning," Luna continued, her enthusiasm growing. "See, humans don't just endure pain, we study it. We figure out exactly how it works, why it works, And then we use that knowledge. Every injury teaches us something new. The holoprojector showed modern emergency rooms, paramedics in action, battlefield medics. We developed a system called triage, a way to sort multiple casualties by severity when resources are limited. We created techniques to keep people alive with minimal equipment. Did you know that before we had proper medical tools? We used honey to prevent wound infection. We turned spider silk into bandages. We learned which molds could fight bacteria before we even knew what bacteria were. Zephyr-Six raised a crystalline appendage. But why continue performing physical procedures when cellular regeneration technology exists? Luna laughed. Because our way works for us. Sure, your technology is amazing, but humans are incredibly adaptable. Our bodies are designed to heal themselves. Sometimes all they need is a little help staying together while they do it. She pulled up diagrams of human healing processes. Look at this. When we get cut, our blood automatically begins to clot. Specialized cells rush to the injury site. New tissue grows to bridge the gap. It's not fast, but it's reliable. And while it's happening, we just keep going. But why take unnecessary risks? Professor Quantum Prime's tendrils writhed with concern. In today's laboratory incident, you could have waited for emergency protocols. Because seconds matter, Luna replied firmly. In emergency medicine, we have something called the golden hour, the time period where immediate intervention can mean the difference between life and death. We don't always have time to wait for ideal conditions or perfect solutions. Sometimes you have to make do with what you have. The holoprojector displayed images of makeshift medical solutions, splints made from branches, impromptu pressure bandages, field expedient treatments. Humans have performed surgeries by flashlight during power outages, delivered babies in war zones, treated injuries with whatever materials were available. It's not about having the best technology, it's about never giving up, no matter what. She gestured to her bandaged arm. This is nothing. I've seen surgeons complete complex procedures after injuring themselves. I've watched paramedics treat others while bleeding themselves. Not because we're invincible, but because we refuse to let injury stop us from helping others. But how do you overcome the fear? Asked a crystalline student from the back. Luna's expression softened. We don't. We're actually terrified most of the time. But humans have this amazing ability to function despite fear. We acknowledge it, then we do what needs to be done anyway. She brought up one final image, a simple first aid kit. Every human learns basic medical care. It's part of our culture, our history. We know we're not indestructible. We know we can be hurt, killed even. But we also know that most injuries aren't immediately fatal. There's usually time to act, to help, to save ourselves or others. We've spent our entire history learning to make the most of that time. The lecture hall was silent as Luna's words sank in. Zephyr-Six's neural interface was practically overloading with new perspectives on human resilience. These weren't primitive medical practices, they were the refined techniques of a species that had turned their very vulnerability into a strength. Next week. Luna announced with a grin, I'll show you how to make an emergency pressure bandage out of a writing implement and a piece of clothing. Trust me, you never know when it might come in handy. 2 days after Luna's lecture. The Academy's experimental quantum drive laboratory suffered a catastrophic containment failure. The explosion rocked the entire building, shorting out power systems and disrupting the automated medical response grid. Zephyr-Six was with Luna in the cafeteria when it happened. The human had just finished explaining the concept of comfort food when the blast wave hit, shattering several crystalline students and sending waves of disruption through the energy-based life forms. Everyone stay calm, Luna's voice cut through the chaos. She was already moving, pulling her ever-present first aid kit from her bag. Zephyr, Nova, with me. Bring any medical supplies you have. The scene in the quantum lab was devastating. Shattered crystal fragments littered the floor, mixing with pools of various biological fluids. Several gaseous students had lost containment, their forms dispersing dangerously. The automated systems, designed to handle such emergencies, were completely offline. Luna surveyed the scene for exactly 3 seconds. Right, triage protocol. Zephyr, your crystal structure makes you immune to the radiation. Check those students by the reactor core. Nova, your bioluminescence can help stabilize the gaseous students. I'll handle the physical injuries. Before anyone could protest that she was still injured herself, Luna was already kneeling beside a crystalline student who had shattered into dozens of pieces. "Hey there, stay with me," she said calmly, pulling out what looked like primitive adhesive strips and a bottle of clear liquid. "What's your name?" Prism 9 came the weak response. "My matrix is destabilizing." "Not on my watch." Luna began carefully arranging the crystal fragments. "This is cyanoacrylate, what we call super glue. Originally invented for military field medicine, believe it or not. It should help hold your pieces together until your natural reformation process kicks in." Across the room, Zephyr-Six watched in amazement as Luna worked. She moved from patient to patient with incredible speed, yet each treatment was precise, calculated. For a gaseous student who had lost their containment field, she fashioned an emergency pressure vessel from lab equipment and sealed it with materials from her kit. When she encountered an energy-based life form suffering from severe frequency disruption, she rigged a makeshift frequency modulator using parts from her own communicator. Manual chest compressions on a silicon-based life form, she muttered, pushing rhythmically on an unresponsive crystalline student. "Pretty sure this is going to be a first in medical literature." The student's glow returned, drawing gasps from the watching crowd. Luna immediately moved on to the next patient. "Need more supplies," she called out, her voice steady despite the strain. "Anyone got something like copper wire? Any kind of conductive material?" Students rushed to help, bringing materials from around the lab. Luna quickly organized them into teams, teaching basic first aid techniques on the spot. "Press here, just like that. Keep the pressure steady," she instructed a tentacled student who was helping with a compression bandage. "You're doing great. Now count with me, 1, 2, 3. Hours passed. Luna worked continuously, her bandaged arm seemingly forgotten as she lifted, carried, and treated patient after patient. When the Academy's professional medical team finally arrived, they found an organized triage center run by students who had never performed physical medicine before. 19 critical patients stabilized, Luna reported to the chief medical officer, her uniform stained with various substances. 3 requiring immediate crystal matrix regeneration, 4 needing gaseous containment, 6 with severe energy disruption, and 6 with physical trauma. We lost no one. Full patient notes are here. She handed over a data pad covered in hastily scrawled observations. The medical team stared at her in shock. The chief medical officer's tendrils twisted in disbelief. "You treated all these different species, without automated assistance, without specialized equipment?" Luna shrugged, then winced as the movement pulled at her own injury. "I had to work with what we had. Actually, there are a few techniques we discovered that might be worth documenting. The crystalline matrix responds really well to human super glue. And it turns out that a standard emergency pressure bandage can be modified to create a temporary containment field for gaseous life forms if you reverse the polarity of." She swayed slightly, fatigue finally catching up with her. Zephyr-Six moved to support her, their crystal structure humming with concern. "Perhaps Professor Quantum Prime suggested gently, you should rest now, Student Martinez. You have done more than enough." Luna looked around at the recovering patients, at the students now confidently applying their newly learned first aid skills. "Yeah, okay, but first, someone should probably take photos for the medical journal. Pretty sure we just invented about 6 new emergency treatment protocols." As the medical team took over, Zephyr-Six watched their human friend finally sit down, accepting a drink from a grateful student. In just a few hours, she had revolutionized their understanding of emergency medicine. Not with advanced technology or sophisticated techniques, but with quick thinking, adaptability, and an absolutely stubborn refusal to accept failure as an option. 1 month after the quantum lab incident, the Galactic Medical Academy held a special ceremony. The Great Hall was packed with students, faculty, and even representatives from the Galactic Medical Council itself. Zephyr-Six sat in the front row, their crystal structure polished to a perfect shine for the occasion. Luna Martinez stood on the stage, looking slightly uncomfortable in her formal academic robes. Her previously injured arm was now fully healed, though she had refused cellular regeneration treatment, insisting on letting it heal naturally, in recognition of unprecedented contributions to emergency medical practices. Professor Quantum Prime announced, their tendrils glowing with pride, "We present student Luna Martinez with the Academy's highest honor. Her innovations in cross-species emergency care have already been adopted by medical facilities across 3 sectors." The audience erupted in a cacophony of appreciation expressed through various biological mechanisms. Luna accepted the award with a sheepish grin. "Thanks, but I really didn't do anything special," she said, drawing sounds of protest from the crowd. "I just did what any human emergency responder would do. We work with what we have, we adapt, we improvise, and we never give up on a patient." Later, during the reception, Zephyr-Six found Luna teaching a group of crystalline students how to fashion emergency support braces from common materials. "You know," Zephyr-Six said, their voice resonating with newfound understanding, "when you first arrived, we thought humans were frighteningly fragile. Now I realize we completely misunderstood. Your supposed weaknesses are actually your greatest strengths." Luna looked up from her demonstration, raising an eyebrow. "How so?" "Your bodies can be injured easily, yes. But because of that, you developed incredible resilience. Your medical technology might seem primitive, but it works anywhere, under any conditions. While we relied on automated systems and specialized equipment, you learned to save lives with nothing but determination and ingenuity." Nova 8 floated over, their bioluminescence pulsing in agreement. "The Medical Council is recommending that all students now take courses in human emergency medicine. They're calling it Practical Universal Response Training, or PERT for short." Luna laughed. "Wait until they hear about our wilderness first aid courses. Nothing teaches creative problem solving like having to make a splint in the middle of nowhere with nothing but sticks and shoelaces." Professor Quantum Prime joined their conversation, their tendrils swaying thoughtfully. "Perhaps that has been humanity's greatest gift to galactic medicine. Not advanced technology or sophisticated treatments, but the simple reminder that medicine, at its core, is about helping others survive. Everything else is just tools. Though I still think your method of sealing wounds with heated metal is barbaric," Nova 8 added, their lights flickering with humor. "Hey, cauterization is a perfectly valid emergency technique," Luna protested, grinning. "But you should see what we can do with duct tape." As the reception continued around them, Zephyr-Six reflected on how much their perspective had changed. Humans weren't fragile creatures to be pitied or protected. They were survivors, innovators, beings who had turned their very vulnerability into an asset. Their medical practices weren't primitive, they were proven, tested, refined by countless generations who refused to accept physical limitations as barriers. In the end, perhaps that was the most important lesson. The true measure of medical advancement wasn't in the sophistication of its technology, but in its ability to preserve life under any circumstances. And by that measure, humans might just be the most advanced species of all. "So," Luna said, interrupting Zephyr-Six's thoughts, "who wants to learn how to make an emergency pressure suit out of plastic wrap and rubber bands?" The gathered students eagerly crowded closer, their various appendages raised in enthusiasm. Zephyr-Six watched with amusement, wondering what other surprising lessons this remarkable human would teach them next.